Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Second Page podcast where we are talking past the points. I am one of your hosts, Joe Oswald. Not with me today, as always, is Jay Martinez, who is out on business this time, but we certainly hope you'll be watching from the office and or watching a recorded episode of the show. But again, with me from behind the big D, and D for desk, I mean, is
Wow.
Steve Johnson,
Okay.
producer at large.
Hey,
How you doing, Steve?
I'm still high, wishing I could book this flight to Wakanda, but it's all sold out.
Yeah, Black Panther is it's quite a drug. I think that they'll actually start nicknaming something that one day.
Yeah.
So let's do the rundown of the show. I know you're used to hearing Jay do that, but I think I'll do an okay job. Today we are going to be talking about Rick Gates. You'll notice the title of the show is Mueller opens the gates.
Just for the record, I wanted to go with stop snitching, but
Well,
I got
snitches get stitches,
outruled.
and we can't really say that because it sounds like a threat to him. And I think he's,
Right.
I think, permanently wearing a bulletproof vest because he might
Right.
be found in a ditch later.
But I think it would be amazing if what's his name, Manafort,
Mm.
just wore a stop snitching T-shirt
That
like
oh,
in court.
that will be creepy, actually. So so we're gonna be talking about Rick Gates. We're gonna be talking. I'm Rick Gates, bitch.
Hey,
Um,
and Miss Seymour, thank you for joining us.
Indeed. We're gonna talk guns and Florida. We're gonna talk a little bit about the student-led protests and rallies that are going on across the nation, including a little bit of a headwind from New Jersey in our public schools. Some students are doing a very good job taking the lead on that issue. Talk a little bit about Israel. I mean, not that
Just a scotch.
just a little smidge. A little bit about some parades. I'm sure you might have heard about a parade or two coming up. We'll talk a little bit about the economy. The economy is sometimes an issue in America. I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of
Is
it.
that really
Yeah, including black unemployment, which, as we all
all
know,
time low?
all
Apparently,
time
yeah,
low, just started a
yeah,
couple months ago, apparently.
yeah.
And
I'm just gonna go ahead and say thanks,
yeah,
Obama.
appreciate that. And then we'll end with a little bit of the Texas Senate race because it is primary season. Primaries are coming up in March for most states. So let's lead out the gate.
The gate. I see what you did there.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm gonna do so many gate puns. I
okay,
think,
all right.
and I imagine he does walk with quite a gait.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm,
it's an open
mm.
gate. So Gates this week pled guilty to two criminal charges, one of which was lying to the FBI. The other was, I believe, some form of wire or bank fraud because him and Paul Manafort weren't doing such nice things for the past decade or so. Um, Rick Gates was the deputy campaign manager, third person now to take a plea deal, aside from Michael Flynn and George Papadopoulos. I'm pretty sure that he can be a rapper one day if he wanted to, after he gets out of jail, because that'll give him
Yes,
street cred.
yes.
Um, so he's been charged. Manafort has been charged with money laundering and bank fraud, specifically conspiracy against the United States, which is a pretty hefty charge. It could put him in jail for the rest of his life. He is maintaining his innocence, including going so far as to attempt to sue um, the Mueller investigatory team, saying that the scope of his investigation was never allowed to reach into his finances or something like that. I mean, it's all hogwash. It's
Hogwash.
it's ridiculous. He tried suing the guy that's coming after him, saying you're not allowed to come after me, but they did in fact go after him, and most of it is actually because they believe that he laundered approximately $30 million through several offshore accounts.
And this is Manafort.
This is Manafort and Gates. Gates was his worked with him in his lobbying firm. He worked right under him, so they've actually worked together for quite some time.
So
Apparently, laundering money through Cyprus, the Seychelles, and the Grenadines in order to fake having income so that they could get real estate loans and mortgages on properties, and then get other mortgages to pay off those mortgages and
so
claim that those were second homes or that their kids lived in them, even though they were renting them out on places like
so they
Airbnb.
didn't pay taxes on the money they laundered.
Correct.
Okay.
And
So
that is basically how they got Al Capone,
okay. So if
because
you
he was all the things that he
your
did.
legal money,
Yeah,
you
all
you
the
didn't pay
things that they
taxes on
did, they
that.
still couldn't get him until they found a book with numbers that didn't have taxes paid on them. Doesn't matter if the money's legal or illegal. You better damn well pay your taxes on it.
So I think the funny thing about Gates is that he actually like this like Manafort was the big fish, or is
Mm-hmm.
the big fish, so to speak, and Gates sort of was the man that helped him do it, but he didn't really make that money, right?
They
He
made the
made
money
some of the
together, yeah.
money, but like I still feel as though this is like, and I heard someone say this early in the week. Gates suffers from having friends in high places, right? Because this is all this, they're putting together a case, so to speak, of if if we get Manafort will lead us to
Yeah,
someone
it's kind of like
something
on
bigger,
the TV shows where you see the guy has a bunch of pins in the wall and there's all these
right?
pictures and yarn leading everywhere.
And
Mueller
there's a crazy
is.
guy with his
I'll bet
his
you
button
Mueller
up
could put
shirt pulled
together a
out.
5,000 piece puzzle in like a day. I don't think
Yes.
he'd have a problem with it. He is slowly but surely working his way up to the top, and the point of getting Gates to flip and turn state's witness is to go after Manafort because Manafort's the one that is resisting. He sent out a tweet suggesting that he had wished that his colleague, he wouldn't say Gates specifically, but he had wished his former colleague had the strength to carry on and fight for their innocence, um, which is basically a very thinly veiled, not so threatening threat, but basically saying, why didn't you grow a pair of balls and stand up with me because you're flipping, and now what am I going to do? I'm just going to stand here and keep fighting. Like he's going to keep fighting.
Okay, but what about the line about? Hey, Jason, thank you for joining us.
Hey Jason, what's up? Nice to see
But
you
what
again.
about the line about no collusion, as though he was sort of signaling to Trump, like, "Hey, man, we're still in this thing together, right?"
I think he was trying to make an allusion to the fact that they are, in this boat together, and if it sinks, he's bringing everybody down with him.
Right.
Uh, captain's always supposed to go down with the ship, but I highly doubt Donald Trump wants to. I mean, I feel like he'd be that guy on the Titanic that grabs a child and dresses up like a woman and says, "I have a child, I must get on this
So
boat."
basically, Donald Trump is Billy Zane.
Yes,
Okay.
but I don't like that reference because sometimes people have said I look like him. Billy Zane,
Mm,
not Donald Trump.
I
I, I,
believe it.
I don't weigh 239 pounds.
No, all you just have to say that you are the Phantom.
A phantom.
Yes, Billy Zane played the
Oh
Phantom.
yeah, he
Yes.
was the Phantom. How about that? My girlfriend would be very upset if I didn't remember that. So
Yes.
in retrospect, I do remember that.
Yes, now you
Yes,
do.
I
And this
remember
is
that
all not
wholeheartedly.
recorded, so
Nope, nobody
Uh,
can look back.
but so my question is, at this point, if Gates is playing ball, um,
We're not
is
even at the seventh inning stretch
Manafort's
right now in this ball game.
is Manafort's only hope a pardon?
No, his only hope is being able to draw this thing out so much that eventually the charges are dropped, or that he does, or that even if he's convicted of anything, that it is overturned on appeal. I think he's going to do everything possible. He's got the money. He knows people. I mean, he's on the record as saying that he's not so much a lobbyist, but a peddler of influence, and that is a quote. He is a peddler of influence. And the biggest thing that they're trying to do by flipping Gates and Flynn and Papadopoulos and going after Manafort before they go after. I mean, it's kind of like you remember the old Mortal Kombat games where it was all 2D battle and you kind of were working your
All
way up
too
that
well.
ladder. Yeah, you work your way up that ladder until you get to
Right.
Goro and your final boss levels and stuff. And at one point, you do have to face yourself.
Right.
And I think that Mueller is now going through this, and at some point he's going to have to face like a doppelganger of Mueller, which would be Trump's main line of legal defense, some lawyer or some special, the FBI
Yeah.
director.
In Michael Cohen versus Robert Mueller, I'm gonna put my money on
Yeah,
Robert
well,
Mueller.
it could end up being Christopher Wray and Cohen. So the point is to work your way up that ladder, and now you're at like level 5, level 6 right now. You've listed 13 Russians that are indicted. That's on the record. You can't do anything about that. Trump can't pardon them because they're not American citizens. The Papadopoulos and all the other, the other two, basically these two that flipped, and now you've got Rick Gates, and you're aiming for Manafort. You're trying to get up to Goro. You're trying to get up to the four-armed one, which I'm pretty sure is Ivanka and Jared. Um, they will likely never turn on their father, but then again, Donald did tell them, never trust anyone, even me. So it's possible you might actually see his own kids turn against him someday. I mean, this is going to make a great documentary, like in 10 years.
No, it's already on TV now. It's called House of Cards.
No, no. Just no, please don't don't ruin that for me. I think one of the main issues
House
here
of
too.
Cards isn't ruined for you yet.
It's not. I paused watching it for a little bit because everything's going on, but I'm like, I'm just gonna finish watching the fifth season. So Rick Gates stayed on even after Paul Manafort was fired, all the way up through election day. I mean, he was flying around on Trump's plane, hanging out with him at events. He is the quote unquote link between the Trump campaign and the RNC. I mean, he was this guy that was more modest than Paul Manafort. I mean, Manafort was spending money like he had it all since birth. He was just dropping $25,000 on suits, buying rugs. Apparently, spent almost $1 million on like ancient rugs. Um, Buying houses and stuff, and upgrading these houses, renovations, and most notably, most of this money came from Ukraine. Viktor Yanukovych, who was the former president of the Ukraine, who laundered and stole hundreds of millions of dollars from his own people, to the point where, when he fled the country due to the protests and ran to Russia, I guess to hang out in the same compound Edward Snowden's hanging out in, which I assume they're probably building a room for Trump once he's run out, if he's run out. Viktor Yanukovych had, a private zoo in the presidential palace. He had artwork and things that were just no value to them. They were worth so
Is
much.
Yanukovych the one who sued Manafort for like $30 million? Somebody lent him money, and then
I think there was a bank. I think
okay,
it was a bank that was suing him.
okay.
But in any case, he was paid over the course of 2 years. He was paid like somewhere between 12 or $14 million out of the politicians Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine, which were very pro Russia. So you can see where there's an established link right now that this person has all the contacts necessary. I mean, right after Yanukovych left, I mean, we're talking about maybe a year or so, not even, the Russians invaded the Crimea. So there is an established link. I mean, we're talking about this yarn is getting very close to the top of that one picture. So Rick Gates, being the more modest of the two, he's gotten a lot of money assessed to him, but for the most part, he kept it pretty cool on the DL, and he was the one that was talking to like Reince Priebus and the guys at the RNC to somehow protect the delegates during the primaries that the RNC was supposedly trying to steal from Donald Trump. I can see that as being something that would win you his loyalty, or rather the other way around, and make him think that you should stick on, and until he eventually was let go as well. The other issue was that basically Manafort and Gates were, at the same time Donald Trump was talking about draining the swamp, these guys were building like a secret bunker vault full of money underneath the swamp that nobody saw. You have to drain the swamp completely to even catch a glimpse of the top of this building.
So let me ask you a question.
Ask away.
We've got Papadopoulos.
That's such a
We've
fun name
got
to say.
Michael Flynn.
Mm-hmm.
We've got now Rick Gates.
Rick Gates.
We've got Paul Manafort.
Mm-hmm.
How many people have to have nefarious ties to Russia before we say, hey, maybe there's not fire, but there's definitely smoke?
Well, I think
Right?
that
Because, like, they say, just because there's smoke, that doesn't mean there's fire. But there's definitely smoke, and you don't not do anything about smoke.
yeah, I know. You can't just like sit there and be like, someone's making beef jerky. Like this, we're not making beef jerky. This, we're making treason. I mean, the people, Manafort, Papadopoulos. I'm sorry, Gates, Papadopoulos. I mean, these guys have pled guilty to conspiracy against the United States, to money laundering, to bank fraud, to wire fraud, to these Russians. The 13 nationals and the business were charged with aggravated identity theft, with trying to undermine the U.S. government. These are serious charges.
Now, again, and even more so, think about this. All of these, again, Gates, Manafort, Papadopoulos, Flynn, they've all taken money from Russia. What's the other guy? He like has a punchable face. It's the first guy they were investigating.
Well, I mean, so many people in the Trump
But no,
administration.
but there's
have punchable faces.
a main guy that the dossier started with. They were looking for that guy. Anyway,
you talking about Christopher Steele, the guy that
no,
started
not
the British
Christopher Steele. Whatever his name is, he's an asshole. the point that I'm trying to make is all of these people have like taken money from the Russian government, and to think that that does not lead to influence or put them in compromising positions to affect things in their way. And again, we still haven't applied the sanctions that were nearly unanimously voted on by the
Mm-hmm.
Congress, right, and signed into law by the president. So we haven't.
It's funny, the same people that understand the influence that the NRA and that super PACs have on politicians somehow don't see the influence that someone who's taking money from a foreign government could be,
But
affecting
all of
our
these people
politics.
that are taking money, and then you have the evidence right in your face. Not let's forget about the fact that Jeff Sessions lied twice about whether he had any contacts with them, but let's say that's fine. We also have Jared Kushner, who can't even get a security clearance, which we will talk about later, also related to Russia. We also have Donald Trump Jr., who was literally looking for opposition information
Yep,
from
Manafort set
Russians.
up that meeting.
Right. So again and again, he has not applied the sanctions.
Mhm.
What? What?
Not
What
only
were
that,
we?
but he's still got outstanding loans with Russian banks, with the German bank. He's going around the world selling military equipment to Saudi Arabia right after he says we should be able to sue the government of Saudi Arabia for its, collusion in 9/11. Where his kids are in India trying to sell luxury hotels with the Donald Trump
Yeah,
name.
and they were advertising it, get a meeting with the president's son.
Yeah,
But whatevs. I would love for someone to explain to me why this is all fine.
it's all fine because it's like the first time. I mean, maybe not the first time, but it's like the first time in the age of social media and the tininess of the world that these people are without impunity and just brazen about doing something. It's kind of like when you're playing, with your sibling. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. You try to get as close as you can without actually touching them because if you physically do touch them in their mind, that sibling's like, you just touch me and they'll punch you in the face, kind of thing. Or maybe not your sibling, but anybody will just assume, okay, you finally, you kept saying this entire time, you're annoying the hell out of me, you're breaking the rules of my private personal space, and then as soon as if you just touch me even with your fingernail, I'm going to come after you.
But I guess the question I'm asking is, hasn't the touch already happened?
No, I don't know. I think he's getting closer and closer, and he's poking near your eye and making you very uncomfortable, and your personal space is definitely invaded right now. But at the
Okay.
moment, I mean, the actual physical touch is the direct evidence, the irrefutable evidence that can be used. Right now, Donald Trump is being sued by the district attorney of Maryland, the attorney general of Maryland, in federal court, both as the president and as a businessman, for violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution. And he contends that, because he did not divest from his businesses, because of all the things that are clear and obvious that his name is being used to garner political favor and meetings around the world, and that no matter what prices he charges across the globe for his hotels and whatnot, foreign leaders and diplomats and business people will pay it to get into that hotel, to say they were there, to get a meeting with him, wherever it might be. I mean, these are private businesses. These aren't anything that anybody has any oversight over. It's absolutely a direct violation of the emoluments clause, which has never really been challenged that much in court. I mean, we're talking about the fact that Jimmy Carter sold his peanut farm to avoid the even the perception that he was doing anything wrong. And this man owns billions of dollars worth of real estate, and he's sending his kids all around the world doing this, business dealings for him. It's
Let's
ridiculous.
not forget that Ivanka Trump was awarded several patents in China after a meeting with the
No
Chinese
coincidence
president.
there.
So okay, but we'll see what happens. What do we have next, sir?
What do we got next? So right now we are in the midst of almost the second half of a dozen school shootings, and whether or not they are mass shootings, and you want to parse words and say, well, some of them are just suicides, or somebody fired a gun into a window and it didn't hurt anybody. These are still shootings on school campuses. the debate right now is Donald Trump saying things like "Let's arm teachers," and uh, and then not really following through with it. Well, I mean, he's following through with that, but saying things as well. Let's ban bump stocks. Let's raise the age to 21 to buy guns and make this a federal rule. Um, what else was it? Increase funding for mental health, even though you just cut, $800 million from mental health funding. So, so it's like he takes it away and then gives it back, and all of a sudden he looks like the hero.
Right.
At the same time, he's saying he met with Paul Ryan, he met with leaders at the NRA, and said they're on
Also,
board.
just one thing about all this, um, the with the new budget and the new tax plan, I think there's something like $25 billion taken out of school safety
Mm-hmm.
programs. But whatevs.
Yeah, I mean, they talking about, there's some people that say, we need armed guards and we need big concrete walls and bulletproof glass and stuff like that. I'm like, you're talking about a prison. I mean, it's basically like a prison. And
Right.
the school there, the in Texas, there are schools that are threatening to suspend students who protest guns and who are in support of the Florida students. You've got Second Amendment advocates and the NRA and the CPAC people going around saying things about how, you know, Democrats and liberals just love watching children die and white women crying because their kids are dead and use it for political advantage. And they're,
She also said none of that when she was in the faces
oh,
of
yeah.
the victims
No,
in the
when
town hall
surrounded
the
by
night
tons of her
before.
friends and on stage at the CPAC, and she got her hair done, looked all pretty, and trying to convince people that guns are sexy and American. At the same time, she wouldn't say that directly to one of their faces, to these mothers. I mean, she contends that we love seeing this kind of stuff because we utilize it for political purposes to go after gun laws. And at the same time, they're using it for political purposes to protect gun laws. I mean, there
So
are several states and cities that have certain restrictions on guns, but there's no outright bans on straight up owning a weapon. I mean,
right.
even New Jersey, you can still own a weapon under certain circumstances. It's strict. With 9 million people packed into New Jersey, that's a dangerous situation to have everybody running around with guns. But we're talking about there are 55 million gun owners in America. That's 1/6 of the population owns enough guns to give everybody in the country a gun. And they're still selling them. And after every mass shooting, after every school shooting, stocks for Remingtons and Lockheed and all these gun makers go up. There's no
So
incentive.
are you saying that maybe it's the NRA that loves these mass shootings?
Yes, I would like to go on the record as saying I think the NRA likes mass shootings. I think they love seeing.
Because it gives them an opportunity to
Yes.
jump up and say they're going to take your
Yep.
guns away
As
from
soon
you.
as it happens, I mean, nobody even says anything before they're like, I mean, Tommy,
Whatever her
Tumor
name is.
Loren.
Dumb blonde girl.
Yeah, Tumor Loren, I'm going to call her. I mean, Trump can give nicknames, I can too. Tumor Loren. She says it doesn't even take 24 hours before the left and Democrats and liberals to come out attacking gun owners and gun rights, when it took less than 24 hours for her to accuse us of trying to take gun owners and, guns away from people. There's no one that I am very close to or in my political ideology that thinks that we need to get rid of the Second Amendment. I mean, it's in there. It's the second part of the Bill of Rights. But life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Life comes before liberty and the pursuit of happiness in written. And Republicans love saying, let's take the Constitution literally, word for word. And word for word means word for word. The
But
Second Amendment comes after the First Amendment, which includes the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. This is a grievance. They are petitioning the government for redress of grievances. The GOP is attempting to stop them by threatening to suspend students, by threatening or by trying to force teachers to put guns in their hands. And despite only paying them $30, $40, $50,000 a year, not letting them write off pencils and school books and things they buy for the class. On top of that, having armed guards that don't even go in and do their job, and you're expecting a janitor and the math teacher to stand up and start shooting back at one of their students, at someone who they probably know. And when you're talking about a school shooting, these are usually surprise attacks where they cause panic, they get people to run, and we're talking high-powered assault rifles. In every one of these cases, it's a high-powered assault rifle.
so a few things that Jason has given us another both sides argument.
Yeah,
He says
gotta
there's
love 'em.
extremists on both sides. stretch sanity and views should be muted. Yes, that's true, but I think the both sides argument sort of it can be used. I'm not saying you, Jason, are using it nefariously, but it can be used to sort of downplay the the fervor on sides that people don't agree with. So it's the same thing like the whole all lives matter thing, or there were both sides in Charlottesville and things like that. But you are right. People take it too far. I will say this. Here are two ways to do this. And again, we're not in the UK, but I know in the UK, citizens or police cannot carry guns. It's not allowed, and
That country's like
only
1,000 years old.
only the military can carry weapons. Right? That's one thing. The second thing is because a lot of people will argue that that citizens should have the same the same access to firearms that the police does.
Can I park a B-2 stealth bomber in my garage?
No, you cannot.
No, but
Neither
but
can
Hillary's
police.
emails.
I know they were pretty bad. So, but the point is, I can empathize with saying that citizens should be able to have the same access to weapons that the police does. However, um, the police are supposed to be trained for those things.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that if you want to say that we should be allowed to have assault rifles, although I don't know what they're for other than like killing,
They're
a lot
purposely
of
created
people.
for hunting humans, not deer.
Right. So, but that's fine. If we want to have those, I think that we should treat guns like we would treat a car, which is you have to register it. You have to update that registration every 2 years. You have to take a written test. You have to take a physical test. You have to get insurance on these things. And maybe that is a way to sort of curb some of this that we see because the argument becomes that this if we put a law in place it won't stop all murders, therefore why do anything? But that's like why have a speed limit, why have any laws because
Mm-hmm.
some people are going to break them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I really that
if it deters
gets under
if
my
it
skin.
saves like one life, isn't that enough?
Mm-hmm.
You
And
know what I mean?
and again,
If
it's
we
not like
say
you're
that
saying you can't have anything. It's just like saying but you were a drunk driver, you lose your license for 2 years, or sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. You pay a fine. You end up having to use public transportation, i.e., law enforcement, to protect you instead of protecting yourself for a little bit. There, it gets under my skin every single time someone says something like, and most of the time it's usually these libertarians who think they're so, "Oh, I think that nobody should tell you to do anything," which is just it's stupid. For hundreds of thousands of years of human history, we've had hierarchies, we've had laws, we've had rules. You follow
right
them or you don't.
and and the other idea is they'll talk about illegal guns and not being able to stop that, but part of the reason these illegal guns come into play and they end up in cities like Chicago and things like that is because they are purchased legally at some point
Mm-hmm.
in red states at gun shows with
Yep.
no sort of registration or checks.
Yeah, it's not like they're coming
So
from
if
China or
I can
Mexico. I mean,
if
some
I
of them
can
are.
go to some place and at a gun show and buy a gun with no background check, and then
No waiting period.
there's no way of knowing who I am or how I have that, I can go and illegally sell that guns, and that's how a lot of that happens. So maybe if we force a registration of any person that has a gun.
It's got to be federally though. It can't, I mean, this state by state
Yeah,
bull isn't gonna
yeah,
help anybody. That's why you still have shootings in Chicago and people post up little pictures side by side. Look, Chicago has strict gun laws and people die every day or every other day there. Well, it's because you're getting guns from Indiana. They're getting guns from Texas and they're driving them up and selling them on the black market because they're valuable in that way to criminals who are already committing crimes as it is.
yeah. And I think Jason agrees. He says if you're trained, proficient, tested, and screened, info shared, bullets, guns, etc., more like driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's how these things should be treated.
Exactly.
No one is saying you can't have it,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe like every 2 years you should have to go and retrain, show that
Yeah.
you can.
Ask, is everything okay at home?
Yeah.
Have you been thinking about killing
I,
yourself or
I
anybody?
personally think that there should be psychological
Yeah,
examinations.
I mean, it's supposed to be
Now-
for self-defense. It's supposed to be so that every state can have its own militia to protect states' rights. We have an army now. There's a National Guard. There are state militias. You don't need 500 guns in your house, and
May,
19-year-olds don't need to be able to purchase AR-15s
but
to protect themselves from the
maybe you
government.
feel like you do, but you
If you do,
should be. It should be proved. You should
mm-hmm.
have to display that you are responsible
Yeah.
with those guns.
Everything else. I mean, even alcohol. Yes, kids still drink alcohol. Believe it or not,
Even though
even though
the
it's
age,
illegal.
are you
Isn't it weird?
really?
Yeah, and
Huh.
kids smoke cigarettes and marijuanas.
Okay.
Yeah, they have marijuana cigarettes.
Okay.
And they do all of that despite its
Hmm.
illegality. And marijuana is illegal for everyone. Despite its illegality, people still do it.
Right.
But
And for
there
drunk
are
driving,
punishments.
you can go to jail.
Yes, there are punishments, there are disincentives, and I guarantee you there'd be a lot more drunk driving accidents. There'd be a lot more overdose deaths in high schools and middle schools. There would be a lot, well, nothing, nobody
But
really overdoses on marijuana.
the,
I
the,
mean,
the point is, maybe it
there'd be
won't
a lot
save.
more tasty cakes being
Right.
sold,
Maybe it won't
more
save
diabetes.
every life, but if it saves some
It will
lives,
save a
if it
lot.
saves one life, it isn't
And most
that
and
isn't
most
that
time it's
worth it?
and think about it, it's saving the life of mostly children at this point. I mean, you're talking about inner cities and you talk about schools, and almost all these people are people, ages, it's unfortunate to say this, but to start at Newtown, we're talking about 4, 5, 6 year olds all the way up to 18, 19, 20 year olds in colleges and in high schools and inner cities, these gang members, these kids that have no prospect for their lives, and they're basically forced into these situations. They are the people who would not be dying, and their lives, and I'm not saying anybody's lives are more important than the others, but they have so much more life ahead of them than do, these 50-year-old or 30-year-old guys that are like, no, I need to have all my hundreds of guns in case the government comes after me. I mean, it's not going to happen. And if it does, I mean, we've got a lot more to worry about than whether or not you can fight off the United States military off of your ranch,
Yeah.
somewhere with a shotgun.
Ronnie thinks we should raise the age to 25. Now, what
Mm.
I do want to. There was something around this that I wanted to ask, and basically, there has been like after all these shootings comes the blame game, and
Well,
we
I
see
mean, the
how.
picture you have up right now, that's the gunman in Norway, and he was able to set off a bomb in Oslo and got everybody's attention. All the police and law enforcement went to that situation. He got on a boat, went to an island, and shot up a bunch of teenagers, these liberal social democrats that were at a camp, like a summer camp, and he killed 69 kids with an assault. He just shot kids, teachers, camp trainers, and he did it because he was dressed as a police officer and people didn't run away from him.
Right. So
There's no rules when you're trying to commit mass murder.
right. I guess the question that I wanted to come to was as this blame game starts, we see well the FBI was warned and they didn't get around to doing something about it, and then we hear the Broward County Police got like 39 calls to this kid's home, didn't really do anything about it. The parents let him have a gun even though they knew he was sort of problem child, but they said he knew the rules and they didn't know he had a key. Fine. And now we come to the police officer that they're saying is on camera, who he was the assigned like deputy sheriff who was assigned to that school to
Resource
protect.
officer, I think they call him.
Sure. And he did not go in. He waited there for 4 minutes until people showed up. Now, what do we think about that? Because now, and here's the thing that I found interesting was that the Broward County like sheriff, his boss, I guess, says he saw the video and
Well, they suspended him without pay and then he resigned.
Right, resigned instantly, and his life is basically over.
Mm.
And I'm not coming to his aid, but what do you think about his boss, the Broward County actual sheriff, saying he was speechless? He stood there for 4 minutes and he did nothing. And by and large, the media is calling this man a coward who is derelict in his duty to protect those kids. What do we think about that?
I mean, I think you would say the same thing you would say to a soldier if he abandoned his post on the field of battle. I mean, you're talking about a person whose only job was to be the armed guard in a school because there'd been so many mass shootings. And that's the only reason to have an armed guard. I mean, it's okay to think that human emotions come into play, and like you said before the show started, that someone could be paralyzed with fear for a little bit, but not for 4 minutes. Not if that's the only job that you are there for, that you are a trained officer of the law, a deputized sheriff. You are a person whose sole duty it is to confront a situation like that and de-escalate it, and whether or not you're supposed to wait for backup or anything like that. I mean, I don't know who called this in. I'm pretty sure that when it happened, that they were, they were saying that most of the teachers were getting code reds over their radios and trying to do everything they could to get the students protected. That junior ROTC officer, Wang, he died in this incident trying to protect students, and he was given a medal posthumously. I mean, this was a 15, 16-year-old kid that had more bravery than an armed security officer who was supposed to have one job and one job only, and that was to do this. If this happened on the field of battle, they would this there'd be a court martial. If this happened at the NYPD, if there was a terrorist attack and the guy was running around shooting people and the officer just stood there doing nothing, you better believe that people would be calling for his badge and his gun.
Let me ask you a question.
And before you say anything, you talk about the blame game issue, and these gun advocates are always going around. Well, every time someone gets shot, you blame the gun and not the person. But when a cop shoots somebody, you blame the cop and not the gun. Why is that? I was like, we don't. Of course the cop gets some of the blame too. The fact is that he's authorized to have a gun, but most of the time the civilian is blamed for it. The civilian is blamed for not acting appropriately. You talk about Philando Castile. That is a teacher. That was an armed teacher in a car who followed all the proper steps, was licensed, was trained to carry a weapon, notified the officer he had a weapon, and he still ended up dead in front of his girlfriend in a car for a minor traffic stop.
With his daughter in the backseat.
Exactly.
Now, I guess that's sort of is the point I wanted to come to. Whenever it's an unarmed person being killed, like a person of color, we hear the rounds going around of officers have a hard job, and we don't know what we would do in this situation, and the officer was afraid for their life, and they have every right to want to go home to their families.
I wonder if the football coach thought that when he took bullets in the back to protect his students.
No, well, my question is, what is different about this situation where we say, no, he had a specific job that he signed up for. It shouldn't have been about him getting home to his family. It should have been about him doing his job and his duty and trying to save those kids. What's different?
What's different? I mean, because it's literally that. It's what he signed up for. It's exactly the same thing as if this happened in the NYPD or it happened in the military. I mean, there are soldiers who've jumped on grenades because they knew that they would die, but it would protect their fellow soldiers. There are people who have sacrificed their lives, these football coaches and teachers who took bullets to protect students, and they made that decision in a split second. They heard the guns, they knew that there was someone there, and they did that right then and there. And this was a assistant football coach. This wasn't somebody who was trained in any sort of, panic maneuvers. It's not like they were doing drills every day for this. I mean, this is somebody who probably wanted to go home and see his family too. He had loved ones.
The football coach is a hero, and
we call him a hero for what he did. Therefore, on the opposite swing of the pendulum, we can call this deputy a coward for what he did. And I completely agree with the president in saying that. Trump said it, right, and I agree with him. And that's now the fifth thing this year this presidency that I've agreed with him on. I think that it's perfectly reasonable to say that this man was a coward who did not do his job, does not deserve a badge or a gun.
So I guess what I'm saying is, so the man that pauses when he knows that someone literally has an assault rifle and is mowing people down.
No, not pauses. Does nothing.
Does nothing, right? That guy is a coward because he wanted to save his own life. But the guy that shoots Philando Castile or shot the Tamir Rice or shot the other guy that was running away in the back, those guys were afraid for their lives, and so they had to take action and shoot.
I'm pretty sure that anytime we've talked about them
in those cases, no one was being murdered. In those cases, there was no assault rifle where literally children are being murdered in front of them. But those guys have a right to want to go home to their families. This guy is a coward.
You're not comparing apples to oranges. You're more like comparing like Fuji apples to Granny Smith apples here. Because I do believe that those people are cowards too. When you're saying you were afraid for your life,
we should call them all cowards.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to saying one side deserves to go home to their family and this
Say they're
guy
not. I'm not
is a
going to say they're
coward.
not, because they are. If you're telling me you're afraid for your life because an unarmed civilian just happened to be too dark for you or just looked like they might have had something on them, that's cowardice. Fear for your life when you shouldn't have fear in a normal
Because you
situation is
signed up for
cowardice.
this
Yes,
job
you
and
signed
you
up
were
for the job.
trained for this.
Exactly. You signed up for the job. You were trained for it. You shouldn't be a person that's so easily scared. A
Right.
person with a gun should not be someone so easily scared, which is why you don't need 19-year-olds with a gun. If you want to be 18,
Or
19, 20 years old,
teachers.
or teachers. I mean, if you want to be 18, 19, 20 years old with a gun, join the military. Learn how to use a weapon. Then you can buy a gun less than 21. Besides that, if you are not 21 years old and you can't buy beer, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. If you can't buy
Right.
cigarettes in most states unless you're 21, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. You can vote when you're 18 because at that point, yes, you're out of school and you should be active and start getting into the thing. But you can't be president till you're 35. You can't be a senator till you're 25. And in some states, with the exception of I think Kansas, there's age limits on being any in a political office. I mean, right now there's a 16-year-old, a couple of them actually running for governor of Kansas, I believe, because for some reason they forgot to put an age limit in their constitution, but now they're adding one. So if you are not allowed to operate heavy machinery, if you're not allowed to operate a trash compactor, which when I worked for a convenience store, you had to be 18 years old to operate the trash compactor. If we're saying that there are literally thousands of things that you should not be allowed to do or purchase or participate in due to your age, can't go to a rated R movie unless you're 17 or with a parent, that you can't watch pornography or participate in pornography, that you are not allowed to um, uh, travel unaccompanied, on a plane or something like that. If there are restrictions for all of these things, and we're honestly going to say that there shouldn't be a restriction for the deadliest weapon on earth aside from bombs, I mean,
Hang on a second. Now, Jason says fear and cowardice are totally different.
they
The
go hand in
cop,
hand.
he says, the cop who did nothing is a coward. And I would say to everyone, I would submit that I wish the cop who shot Philando Castillo or Tamir Rice, or I wish they were cowards. I wish they would have taken 4 minutes to
Mm-hmm.
think about what they were
Yeah,
doing
preach on
because
there.
they were afraid.
Yeah.
So maybe we should have more cowards then.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Um,
but then again, do you want cowards being the ones protecting you? Do you want the cowards to be the ones
I
between the
want well
maniac trying to
trained
murder your
people.
children?
I want well trained people to do their jobs,
I agree. I mean,
including
honestly, how would we feel if there was a fire in your building and the firemen got here and they just froze for 4 minutes, like, oh my god, a fire, what do I do? What are you gonna do if a paramedic sees you bleeding out of your neck and they're paralyzed with fear for 4 minutes because they don't know what to do and they're scared that they're
what
gonna
would
be
you
blamed for your
do if
death?
your house wasn't on fire but a fire truck showed up and then started the
Spraying
turned
your
on
water,
fire hose?
or you go to the hospital because you have a headache and they start cutting your chest open for no
Right.
reason. I mean, every other job is held accountable for what they do. Why not the police? Even the military, they are held accountable for what they do.
But and the reason we came to all of this is because this cop is a distraction
Mm-hmm.
from all because the system broke down at every level for these kids.
Yeah.
And now it's this cop, but now we're talking less about the FBI doing nothing. And I just found it funny that the Broward County police sheriff could be disgusted at this guy, but you guys were called 39 times and this kid was still
Well, the
allowed to.
governor of Florida and the representatives from Florida, Marco Rubio, and one of the congressmen, they were confronted by these students. They were confronted in protests, in town halls, in phone calls. Um, Marco Rubio honestly used the word evolve, which for a Republican is blasphemous.
So he and so one and a lot of people are saying we should give him credit because he actually showed up where Rick Scott didn't to that event.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like Marco Rubio's always been kind of a snake, and let's see what he actually does.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll say I can evolve. Um,
Well, I mean, listen, you've got Marco Rubio, a senator from Florida, red state, gun, 1.3 million concealed carry permits in that state. And you've got Rick Scott, the governor of that state. Kind of, I mean, he looks like someone, I just don't know who. But he is Rick Scott, governor, decided that they would attempt, even though the Florida legislature did not pass a bill to restrict gun rights, he is now in favor of raising the age limit to 21 to purchase a weapon, to
He
increase
says he's in
state funding.
favor. I want to
Yeah,
see what
to
bills
increase
he
state
introduces or
funding. Well, I mean, you have to
signs.
wait for the legislature because you can't just do it. Increase funding for mental health awareness, and to ban bump stocks in the state. I mean, New Jersey is doing the same thing, and ironically enough, Donald Trump wants to do the same things: ban bump stocks, raise the age to 21.
Although he said none of that at CPAC, but sure.
No, of course he wouldn't say it at CPAC. But believe it or not, in most of these places where he won the vote by significant portions, he's actually more popular than the NRA. So if the NRA can't stand up, I mean, it can stand up to him, but when they're in the same room with him, they back down. We're talking about the first time ever where you have a president who is actually able to effectuate gun control because he's the one in the party that usually doesn't do it.
Right.
Just like he said he wants to drain the swamp, and the only way to do it is from the inside out. This is probably the only chance we'll ever really have. And I got to say, I do agree with him. I think that this is the only way to do this deal making thing because he has ordered the Justice Department to find a way to regulate and ban the sale of bump stocks, and that's nationally. It's the only way these kinds of things are gonna be effective. Stringent background checks. He's pushing for that. Pushing for raising the age limit, but also trying to push for arming teachers, which Rick Scott is not in favor of. He's obviously the governor of the most recent state to do that, and he thumbs in the eye of Donald Trump, saying it's ridiculous. You've got to rely on law enforcement. We all know that Donald Trump is not the biggest fan of law enforcement right now. He'd rather arm the teachers than arm the police.
Well, he's always been a fan of cops, right?
Veterans.
But maybe not.
He's always been a fan of veterans.
Right, but not like he's not in favor of the FBI.
No.
Right now.
Law enforcement.
Or ever, because they're investigating it. And
but
they're coming for
the thing is, you at this point though, you can't say Donald Trump is doing nothing. He's not doing nothing. I mean, you got Rick Scott saying we're going to do all this stuff, and he's responding to his own direct voters. And Donald Trump,
because a lot of these people are saying, I'm going to be 18 and I'm going to vote you the F out.
Yeah, but now you got people across the country that are against any kind of regulation and stuff. These are the meat and potatoes of Donald Trump's core group of voters, saying that they don't want to see something like this. They feel betrayed.
Right.
But Donald Trump counters his betrayal of saying the bump stocks and the age limit and the mental health by saying let's arm the teachers, which I'm 50-50 on that because I know some teachers that I think would be perfect examples of someone who's well-trained enough, responsible enough, and with the safety technology available on weapons, biometrics, and things like that, you could keep a locked, safe gun in a classroom with a teacher who volunteers to do it and is trained to do it, as there are in some states. There are plenty of states where a teacher, if they go through law enforcement training, is allowed to carry a weapon. But there are examples of them leaving the guns behind somewhere, forgetting where they put it, things like that.
Or again, what happens when there's a mistake and a teacher misassesses a threat and shoots a student?
Yeah.
What then? Further,
are you going to go after them and say, are they going to get acquitted just like a police officer would?
Yes, they would. Now, well, it depends on who the kid is, but we won't get into that now. Now, people think that Trump has responded well, but can we say that he responded well when he went to CPAC and said that they want to take your guns away?
No, he was playing to his crowd. That's what he does. He loves
rallies. The fears
rallies
of these people, which is further driving people into the corners, which would lead nothing.
He's trying to play both sides. He wants to keep his base motivated enough to keep voting for him, and just go far enough with gun control type regulations and rules and rhetoric to get some of the white mothers in suburbia to keep saying, okay, we'll stick with you for now.
Gold, you mean?
Exactly. But at the same time, knowing that it's not going far enough to cost him his NRA crowd. I mean, they'll bitch and they'll moan and complain, but they'll be like, I guess it's not that bad.
I don't know. I feel like when you start off, when you're sort of opening salvo is they're going to take your guns away, that leads people to say we can't allow them to do anything because it becomes this slippery slope argument. And that is the slipperiest of slippery slopes, is they're going to take your guns away, so we can't let them do anything. I promise you that the NRA and their constituents will not want to go along with even the most common sense stuff because history.
Well, listen, the NRA's got about 5 million members. that is, less than.
Forget about the 5 million. How much money do their lobbyists have?
Well, right now they have quite a bit, and when we get to the
And
part about the
influence.
economy, I'll talk about some of the people that are abandoning the NRA. But we're talking about Florida, which is a very important state when it comes to the election of the president. Trump and Rick Scott both won it by about 1.2 to 1.5 points. Marco Rubio carried a little bit more. Representative Brian Mast, who's a congressman from Florida, who's said his position is changing on guns. They're all looking to make sure that they can be reelected. If you are seeing all these millennials, these people turning 18 now, these kids that were born just before, just after 9/11, they're going to be voting in the 2020 presidential election.
How
They're
do you
they're
think
the
Rick
people.
Scott's gonna fare?
They're the people that will be much more likely to be motivated to protest, to rally, and to get people, including their own parents, on their sides to vote for a change because these people aren't being listened to. And if you just continue to listen to this aging group of people who just don't want anything to change and want America to constantly live in the 1950s, then you're going to see the blue wave get bluer. You're going to see states like Florida and Texas are going to change. Towards the end of the show, I wanted to talk about the Texas Senate. And, there are things happening right now that are going to make it very difficult for Republicans to keep the status quo on guns.
You know what I find another funny thing, and then we can move on.
Did you show
Uh,
the other picture of Rick Scott?
I did. He's laughing right now. But like we are witnessing a movement right now, and it
Mm-hmm.
seems like there will, out of the mouth of babes, as they say, right? It seems like these kids are putting pressure on politicians to at least do something.
Something, yeah.
Now, I when those kids get together, and yes, they're very well spoken.
61% of 18 to 29-year-olds are in favor of stricter laws. 9% say no.
Now, those kids get together and they want their voices heard. What happens? We get a big town hall where you get the senator and the governor shamed for not coming, and you have the NRA coming down there listening to them speak and listening to them get yelled at and called on their bull whatever, right? When unarmed person gets killed and people protest, the riot gear gets pulled out.
Mm-hmm.
And
So much for that
is,
First Amendment, right?
yeah, it is all about like the influence of their or the affluence of these kids and their parents, and I do find that funny, but I guess ends and means and whatever.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's definitely a reckoning that is coming. It is something that is going to happen. It is these kids aren't just going to sit down and shut up. The same people that are
Black
saying,
Lives Matter got called terrorists.
yeah, and the KKK are just they're good people on both sides.
So
These
whatever.
kids that are turning 18 years old, these kids that can register to vote when they're 17 and that will be able to vote in the 2020, they're not going to sit down and shut up. And these people, these old Republicans, these elitist white folk that want all the guns and all the money and nothing for anybody else, they are the ones that are saying, don't listen to these kids. We can't let these kids decide what our future is going to be.
Because they're just child actors.
Yeah, but they're child actors.
I'm
but
sorry,
at the same
not
time,
child actors, crisis actors.
crisis actors. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot about that part because it's not okay to pay kids to advocate for crisis, but it's okay to pay you to advocate for gun
will
rights.
say some of these kids are more well spoken than me, and I kind of want to like send my kid to that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it did, but
Well,
I'm just saying they
in
were
any case, those
kids.
same people are saying don't listen to those kids. They have no opinion. They can't weigh in on this matter. The same ones who say we should let 16, 17, 18-year-olds buy a fucking AR-15.
Yes.
And I hate to be so blunt about that, but it's just absolutely, it's just boom, it's malarkey. To quote Joe Biden, it's malarkey to assume you can have your cake and eat it too. You cannot say that these children's opinions do
First
not
of all,
matter.
I think
but
Joe
also say
Biden
they
would
deserve
have
a
said
gun.
it's bullshit.
He probably would have, yeah. And at this point, who cares? You can say anything you want.
Nothing matters anymore.
Nothing matters anymore. It
All right.
sounds like a Linkin Park song starting off. But
Veterans Day is coming up.
Veterans Day is coming up, and the funny thing about all this, let's be careful about the guns and displays of everything.
Before Veterans Day, we got other stuff to talk
Oh,
about,
well,
don't
I
we?
mean, okay, so just to tie up then, former President Barack Obama, number 44, one of my faves. I definitely enjoyed his time. Is behind these protesters, behind the students, and he got elected doing this very same thing by organizing and motivating students, young people, the youth of America. Now, while Donald Trump will sit and he will, you know, listen to the kids and stuff like that, and he made an okay, go at it. He did. Um, I'm not going to blame.
He did have notes.
He did have
to
some.
say,
Yeah,
I
he
hear
did
you.
have some things to say. But Barack Obama tweets a response saying that we've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for these people, these kids, these ones who were not old enough to vote while Barack Obama was president, but were inspired by him. They were motivated by the people that he motivated. It traveled down the line. That's the trickle down that works. That's the domino effect that works, and that he has your back. We're talking about a man who will live for at least another 40 years. I mean, we're talking about someone who is not gone
Well,
from
he's gonna have to
politics.
stop smoking for that, but yes.
I think he's pretty okay, but he's not going anywhere anytime soon. He's going to stay involved, and Donald Trump will be gone long before Barack Obama will, God willing. But this is a person who is very influential, who is well spoken, and who believes that democracy functions when people participate. He's got our backs, he's got their backs. I've got their backs too. I think that even if we only have 5, 10, 15 viewers at any one time on this show, that it is worth it to say that we do support these students and we support their First Amendment rights just as much as I support, well, maybe not just as much, but on an equal level as I support the Second Amendment rights, because I believe if you're going to directly interpret the Second Amendment word for word, then you need to do the same thing for the First Amendment. You need to allow freedom of speech, no establishment of religion. You can't abridge the rights of the press, call them fake news, and say that they anything they say is wrong if it's against you, and you absolutely cannot abridge the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress.
Just one last thing, because I feel like we've been on this
we
for
have
an hour.
No, we haven't.
I guess my question is, there was a Supreme Court decision. I don't know if it was a Florida Supreme Court or
Texas.
Texas that said that the Second Amendment does not cover all weapons.
Yeah, Texas Supreme Court ruled, and then I think it went to the actual Supreme Court last year that said that an assault rifle, specifically I think an AR-15, was not a guaranteed protected weapon under the Second Amendment, because not only could the government show just cause and narrowly tailor laws restricting them in the government's interest, but they could also show that it was the public safety was outweighed by
also
the right to own that specific weapon, because you could still own hunting rifles and handguns and all the other manner of things.
The other thing is, no one can just go and buy an Uzi.
No, you cannot buy a little machine gun.
Why is that?
Because it's a danger to public safety.
Oh, okay.
It's a military weapon. You can't buy a Gatling gun. You can buy a flamethrower as long as the flame doesn't go more than 3 feet.
As long as Elon Musk sells it.
Yeah, well, as long as the flame doesn't go more than 3 feet, you could buy a flamethrower probably even on Amazon.
But yeah, so if you can't buy an Uzi and we've accepted that, then maybe these those AR-15 style weapons, you shouldn't be able
assault
to buy.
Rifles.
Yes,
They're
sure.
Assault rifles.
There you go. All right. Do we want to talk?
Yeah,
this
the embassy deal. I mean, it's not a huge issue at the moment, but when we talked about it in previous episodes, we had talked about how Donald Trump decided to recognize. I mean, following U.S. law passed by Congress in the 90s and signed by Bill Clinton, that the embassy in Tel Aviv would be moved to Jerusalem, because we would now recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and that's where embassies go, in capitals. So we thought this was going to take a lot longer, probably towards the end of Donald Trump's first term, barring Democrats taking the House and the Senate. They are moving it from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem now in May of this year. So we're talking about in 3 months, less than that. They're gonna, but they're using old consular buildings, just a whole bunch of them, just sporadic, just little consular buildings, will now represent the U.S. Embassy while they're looking for a location to actually build the embassy, to the point where the ambassador will still be commuting from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to conduct business. It's more of just like a, I don't know, like just a, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's not
shit show?
No, it's not even a shit show. I mean, we're talking about they don't have the security measures in place to protect an ambassador or to protect, vital diplomatic things that are usually kept in an embassy. The American citizens will be very hard pressed if they're in trouble in Israel to find the embassy there. They'd likely still go to the one in Tel Aviv. And I think they're really just doing this to put a political show on, to say that they're opening this embassy right away, despite the fact that there's supposed to be all these State Department regulations that are supposed to, be followed to make sure everything is safe. And the final opening is supposed to be at the end of 2019. So I don't know why they're rushing into this. Maybe they're trying to promote the Palestinians to attack them, or Hamas to attack them, so they have a reason to go back in there to say, "Haha, we told you, they're bad hombres."
I mean, maybe they want to get it done for Netanyahu's dragged out in cuffs.
Yeah, Benjamin Netanyahu will very likely face a vote of no confidence and be removed, if not arrested. I mean, we're talking massive corruption and bribery, where even his closest confidants have flipped on him, which I'm sure Donald Trump is very sympathetic to. He's like, "Oh, poor Benji, poor Benji, your closest confidants."
You know why he likes Netanyahu, right? Because Netanyahu didn't like Obama.
Exactly. They have so many things in common.
Bedfellows.
And honestly, it'd be really funny if the same year that Benji is taken, to jail, or at least given immunity through a plea deal to step out of power, that maybe Donald Trump will do the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like
I say, him and Edward Snowden could be very nice roommates in Russia.
I feel like Trump will win re-election because nothing.
That might be the first time you can call me wrong. I don't think you will. So it's also the 70th anniversary of the founding of Israel, which is why they're trying to push it for the 2018 date. There's also that too. So whatever. I mean, it is the capital. I can't really argue against that. I do argue the methods of which they approached going about this, but what are you going to do about that?
I mean, everybody said they were going to do it, and he did it, but there's probably a reason everybody didn't do it.
Exactly. There's a very big reason. But we've talked about that ad nauseum, as some would say. So next up on the docket, parades. So, before, when we talked about the parades, I was very adamant that I don't think a 5-time draft dodger and megalomaniac like Donald Trump deserved a parade for anything. I mean, we didn't do anything yet. We don't have any great grand victory that's worth spending $25 million on a parade for. But now they've, conferred amongst the generals and decided that if they're going to do a parade, it's got to be on Veterans Day. So I think I even mentioned that the only excuse I could think of to do it would be like July 4th or Veterans Day. And I mean, this is Donald Trump again, using veterans as human shields for his political games. He's going to throw these guys out there and say, if you're against me, then you're against them. And they're not going to be able to do anything about it. He's the commander in chief. He says march, they pretty much got to march. And his generals and his chief of staff, they're going to organize this, and the Pentagon's going to organize this, and they're going to do it, and they're going to raise private funds from these gung-ho nationalist, pro-America guys, not that I'm against America, but these guys are like super, if it's got the word America and I don't care if it's a bag of shit stamped made in America, they will buy it.
Well, so as long as there aren't tanks in the street.
There will be tanks in the street. That's the whole point of a parade. There are going to be tanks and missiles and guns, and they're going to be showing off all of our guns.
Do those things, right? If we say we want to have a big parade with some extra fireworks and more like people dressed up and more flags and stuff, great. But like,
he wants it to march from the White House to the Capitol, I think.
Yes, and he's probably going to invite Emmanuel Macron and say, "Look, we're better than you because I have small hands." And,
yeah. Look at my big military and my tiny hands.
So
I will eat cheese and drink your Trump wine, which is now discontinued.
And freedom fries.
I'm sure that he enjoys that. We'll get Justin Trudeau to come down and serve him poutine. I went to Canada and I didn't get the chance to try it. I did try pea meal, which is something. It was good. I didn't mind it. It was like pork or something.
Word-shaped air is coming out of your mouth. I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's Canadian stuff. It's America Light. So he wants his parade. He's going to get it. It's ridiculous, and you're going to see all these MAGA people standing, lining the road and stuff, and I have a feeling that half these soldiers really probably do not want to do it.
I mean, it's Veterans Day, so there'd be a parade anyway. Mm-hmm. This is just like an extra parade.
This time they'll just be carrying weapons, marching missiles down the street, with Trump standing on some high balcony over there watching them like Joseph Stalin or Kim Jong.
Again, I think it's fine if there's no like tanks and guns and stuff
Yeah, I think if we're not
in the
parading
street.
nuclear missiles down the street,
Yeah.
whatever,
So
let it happen.
you know,
I can't fight him on everything, and he he got it. He
there's
got around me.
other
He found it on
things to
Veterans
do.
Day.
It's not on President's Day.
No, no, president. Well, of course, and he assumed President's Day was just about him. It's really about the other guys. I mean, I salute 42, 43 out of the 45 presidents.
He is your president too.
Yeah, he is my president, in name only. That's
Okay.
it.
All right. What do we got next?
The economy, the most
stupid.
exciting thing. Yeah, the economy, dumbass. The economy. I'll have that with a filet mignon and some Cabernet Sauvignon.
Carvel.
Yep. So the economy's sort of doing its flippy floppy thing. Right now we got interest rates rising, we got a dollar dropping, we got unemployment starting to creep back up. I said several episodes ago, and probably in multiple episodes, that after massive tax cuts, you almost always find yourself with a recession. Right now, the federal government has stopped the 0% interest rates approximately, a year and a half ago, and raised them to like 0.1, 0.2, something that
Right.
just charged money on the money that the government was loaning to banks to loan to us,
Right.
which kept mortgage rates down, loan rates down, if you have qualified credit.
Right.
Gotta always think about the fine print. If your credit score is 950, then you can get this car for $150 a month. If not, you're going to be giving us half your paycheck.
Yes.
But so they end those interest rate things. They start hiking the interest rates up. We got our new Fed chair doing that. The minutes from the meeting are like probably the most scrutinized minutes of any meeting is the Federal Reserve meetings, which is the 12 big banks that run the Federal Reserve and all the money that they spin around. So for anybody that doesn't know, the federal interest rate is the amount of money that is charged to these banks to take money from the Federal Reserve, which is not the U.S. Treasury.
Right.
You have to buy Treasury bonds, which is the money for the government. I don't know. It just goes.
But the interest rate was kept artificially low
Yes.
to sort of help us out of the
Great
Recession.
Yeah, Ben Bernanke was using what was called quantitative easing, which was just pumping money into the economy, printing money, buying treasury bonds, keeping interest rates low, making money easy and affordable to get. And now that we're technically out of that recession, the stock market's doing well, unemployment's
when faced with inflation, you kind of have to raise the interest rate.
Yes, you have to. And that's the only way to control it, but people start panicking when they see that. So you see stock sell-offs. Right. You see people cutting wages. And despite all these bonuses that are going out, it was only 4 million people that got bonuses in all of the American economy.
Yeah, it was a lot
reasonable.
More than 4 million worth of advertisement.
So on top of that, I mean, there are now some people reporting that companies like Disney and what have you that were offering the bonuses are now saying they're only going to offer it on contingency that you sign the union contract that they proposed to you. So you don't get that bonus unless you sign.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you don't get that bonus unless you sign the union contract.
Although I am in favor of unions that are designed to protect.
Absolutely. Well, the unions have filed complaints with National Labor Relations Board, and they voted it down.
But the whole point of the company deciding what the rules of the union are is a little weird too. Like I always figured the union is there not against the company, but to protect you from the company. So
well, yeah, I mean it's to protect your rights now. But then sometimes, when you think about like the Gothamist and DNA magazine, they voted to unionize their newsroom, and the guy decided to shut the newsroom down. He just shut everything down and sold it off. And I think WNYC, the NPR news program, has actually purchased the Gothamist and the DNA, and they're going to restart the Gothamist and just maintain the archives of DNA, which was like the local, like on the street, block by block news.
Yeah. Also, one other thing, as far as people, I don't know if it's so much that people are panicking. It's just that if interest rates are higher, then you can get higher yields on bonds that may be greater than what you expected from your portfolio in the
but at the same time,
so,
there are fewer home sales from January to February. The black unemployment rate that Donald Trump likes to talk about so much rose almost a percentage from 6.8 to 7.7%, and that's from December to January. Numbers aren't in for February yet. You got 200 Toys R Us stores in addition to the original closings, are now closing.
But them shit should have been closed. Let's be honest.
But still,
About
those are
Toys R
jobs.
Us.
Those are brick and mortars. Those are 200 empty buildings that are now going to sit.
Yeah, they're
So you've
just gonna
got
work in Amazon
you've got a
warehouses.
bubble that is bursting or has already burst, and you've got these Trump elites talking about how the economy is doing very well and the stock market is the economy and everything is fine. But at the same time, these people that are in the know are cutting wages, they're cutting employees, they're starting it little bit by little bit. They're shedding wages so that they can protect their profits, and they're preemptively declaring bankruptcy protection. They're preemptively selling off stores and merging and buying back stock
Right.
to.
That's what they're doing with most of this repatriated money. One
Mhm.
other thing about the whole like lowest black unemployment rate that sort of grinds my gears is that you know this is as a
Do we have that
result.
chart? Do we have that chart to show the
Uh,
actual unemployment rate of African Americans?
I don't. Which
We have
one is
two.
it?
There's two. There's
We
one
have
that
so
shows the
many charts
comparison
now.
against white unemployment.
Okay. Yes. So here's the thing, so to speak.
I knew that's what you
So
were gonna say. I don't know how.
the unemployment rate has been going down,
Mm-hmm.
right?
For the past 8 years,
Right. And so that's just sort of continuing, but the rate of the decrease has gotten smaller under Trump.
and now it's starting to
So
increase.
so exactly, and it's slowing. So that is a great talking point when you want to have like a token on camera in front of you to say that. But let's a lot of the successes we see here are trends that were already
Yeah,
in
of course,
place.
but no credit is being given to the fact that Barack
First of
Obama
all
brought
these
us out of a
unemployment
recession
numbers
and
were fake when it
yeah,
was when the black guy was in office.
exactly.
But whatever.
So, I mean, now that the rate has risen, we're likely seeing it because, holidays slow down. We had the hurricane season that was particularly disastrous. So you can understand that some people lost jobs and have filed for unemployment. But the decline in the unemployment rate started in 2011 with Barack Obama after this massive recession that he, not alone, but he spearheaded the recovery and brought us out of that and prevented it from becoming a massive depression. And every single time anybody mentions a positive thing about Donald Trump and the African American or black community, he always responds that he agrees. And also, black unemployment is at its lowest rate ever. So you have this gentleman, Wayne Dupree, who recently tweeted that it's okay to be a conservative and to love America and to be black and not vote for Democrats for your freedom, as if he's saying you have two options, but only one of them is the one you can pick. Because if you pick the other one, then you're some kind of slave child, and you're not thinking for yourself. So he's saying if you don't vote for Republicans, that somehow you're a bad conservative black man. And then, of course, even though that has nothing to do with economics or the unemployment rate, Donald Trump has to comment back that yes, he agrees, and also black unemployment is at its lowest level ever. I
Yeah,
mean, you could say something like
that. But
the Black Panther was great. It shattered box office records, and black unemployment is at the lowest levels ever. Thank you for that. That was all me. That's
yeah.
exactly how you respond.
Also, it's very weird. I don't know, and maybe this is me reading too much into it, but like the subtext of what he's saying is, and the amount of applause that he gets at his rallies when he says that is like we knew they weren't working,
Mm.
and I'm finally putting them to work and giving them something to do, and it's weird to me. Is all I'm saying.
Well, it should be. Oh, wait, do you have any like affiliation with the black community?
Just gonna give myself a single shot.
Just pull the camera over
Yeah.
so that the viewers at home
Yes.
know that you are at least aware.
Yes.
Indeed. So I think that it's absolutely continuously ridiculous that he is making these outlandish claims that it's all him, it's all him, it's all him, when now we're starting to see the rate climb back up. We're starting to see interest rates rise, the dollar weakening, manufacturing is going down. Some wages that are still around are going up while the productivity is going down. You're starting to see the economy moving towards what I still believe looks like the beginnings of a recession. And you usually don't know you're in a recession until about 4 to 6 months into it. That's what economists say. So we won't know until probably the summer or maybe even October when the new budget is supposed to
Also,
be.
I want to say that Wayne Dupree is right. Right? You should decide what your principles are and vote accordingly.
Absolutely.
But I do not think that um, and this has long been my, I guess, problem with the Republican Party, and I get that the enemy of my enemy is not my friend, and I think a lot of people should understand that. Like, just because the Democrats have been hypocritical or you know have done dumb things doesn't mean that by default I become a Republican.
What have you got to lose?
Exactly, and it's again, it's that kind of like weird coded language. But the thing I'm trying to say is, you know, I can't support the Republican Party if, even though I have conservative leanings as it comes to economics, um, or real conservative leanings that it comes to economics, but social issues I would
Mm-hmm.
be more liberal because I'm a human and I'm not just in a box, right? But when the Republican Party uses the Southern strategy,
Mm-hmm.
which means they
Red mapping.
use coded language. I mean, they've been using it since the '60s, but whatever. Um, you know, when they do that, when they cater to their base, when Fox News is what it is hard for me to support them because I can't even get to the substantive conversation when they are pandering to people
Mm-hmm.
that think that I am less than what I am.
And human.
So you
Well,
know, I believe that Republicans could have a lot of support from the black community if they weren't so hard at these red
look. I
states.
mean,
And
look at Alabama. Roy Moore. I mean, the Doug Jones won with 94% of the African American vote for him. Only
right,
6% of African Americans that were polled said they voted for Roy Moore.
right. And again, people always talk about Democrats and identity politics. Like, Republicans are all about identity politics. It's all about family values and let's put laws in place that will help the guys in the farms in the red states and things like that, and they're taking their country away from you, and these liberals or whatever. So it's those people who are mad at liberals and mad at the world changing, and mostly white, that they pander to
Mm-hmm.
that identity. So everybody is playing identity politics. Let's not pretend it's the Democrats,
Mm-hmm.
but
I mean,
I'm
they
just
do
saying,
too, but yeah.
let's have real conversation. And I say to the Republican Party who is not listening, how about you put forward some policies that actually speak to me or people that look like me or people in communities that I grew up in, the same way you do with some of these red state
I agree,
communities.
100%.
The
And
same way you pander to people that love their guns, pander to people that have the black experience, but they want the same things you want.
I mean,
But
yeah, I mean, you want to raise your child in a good way. I mean, you were just saying even before that you want to send your son to the school where these well-spoken crisis actors
yeah,
come from because you want the best for your son. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. You want the best for your children. You want them to grow up in a healthy world. You don't want them to be shot by police. You don't want them to be accused of something just because of the color of their skin, and you don't want someone to assume who they are as a person because of the way they talk.
and again, stop with all the coded language
Mm-hmm.
and calling people protesting for their rights terrorists when you see whatever. I'm not going
Yeah.
to get into it.
Well, I
But
mean,
I'm
just
just saying the Republican Party could have a lot of conservative support if they weren't playing the identity politics
exactly. You don't
that
have to
they
be
were.
David Clark. You
Right.
know, like you don't have to go that far overboard as an African American to prove your conservatism by being like him or this Wayne Dupree guy. But you know, with reference to the economy and very relevant, you've got dozens of companies that are now abandoning their affiliation with the NRA because they are just doubling down on this effort that everybody's trying to take your guns, and you know they didn't support Philando Castile, but they're supporting this Nicholas
Right.
guy that, again, I don't want to use his name, I almost slipped there. You know, FedEx I think is still working with them, but might not be. You got Delta and United Airlines broken.
By the way, Apple, Google, Twitter, you can cut ties with the NRA too.
Absolutely, I
YouTube,
certainly hope so.
you could stop that whole channel they
Mm-hmm.
got if you wanted to.
Exactly.
Just a
Symantec,
suggestion.
Symantec, which makes LifeLock, Hertz, Avis, MetLife, Wyndham Hotels, Enterprise, First National Bank of Omaha. They've all cut ties. Chubb, who was their insurance carrier for all their members for their carry insurance.
Right.
It's kind of ironic they have to carry insurance. But in any case, it was in case they.
Is that the carrier company?
Yes, Chubb is the carrier
Yeah.
company. And they would provide insurance and protection for anybody that got in trouble with their carry permits or guns, if they hurt anybody, blah, blah, blah. Even they're dropping them. Their insurance has dropped them. Now, if you own a car, you own a home, you are a living human being,
They
and your
dropped them
insurance has
right
dropped
now.
you.
I also feel like they would kind of come back. Like,
They might.
once
Well,
this dies
they'll
down.
go find someone else to do it. Everybody wants their money. You got the governor of Nebraska saying, come on, NRI, do your rallies and your gun shows and your meetings and stuff over here because Florida's becoming hostile to you. Because they had their
It's almost
rally.
like they're Amazon now. Like
Yeah.
states are like pouring themselves out.
They really are. They basically are. The final bit of things that I wanted to talk about, and then I'm sure that you agree is somewhat important, is the Texas
This
Senate
looks
race.
like two guys I want to punch in the face.
Well, one of them
At least one
deserves it more than the other.
Okay.
We'll say that. So Ted Cruz running against a man named Beto or Beto. I'm not really sure how it's pronounced. I haven't heard it spoken. Beto O'Rourke. And
Okay.
he is the Democratic challenger. He's already outraised Ted Cruz 3-1 in the first coming weeks of the year.
And I would like to submit he has a neck.
He does, in fact, have a neck because I believe he exercises.
Okay.
So, he's only raised about a third of what Beto has raised, and Beto right now is a representative. So far in 2018, he's outraised him, but because Ted Cruz is an incumbent and he's been there for a while, his war chest is significantly larger. But
And
according to
Texas.
filings with the FEC, Ted Cruz only has $6 million in his war chest, whereas this Beto guy coming out of almost nowhere, I mean, he's been a representative, has $4.9 million.
Right.
About $1 million, 1.1 less.
Ted
And he's
Cruz
already been
does
outraising
have
him.
like he's sort of in the public sort of zeitgeist, I guess.
Yeah, you've
My
used that
favorite
word in the
words
last
these
3
days.
episodes.
I like
Yeah.
it. I like that word. No, but my point is, Ted Cruz is nationally known.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the reason he's known is for being a prick, but still.
And I'm glad you
People
said
know.
that because he is
That he's a
accusing that he's nationally known,
Okay,
but also that he's a
sorry.
prick. He's accusing his opponent, who will likely win the Democratic primary in March, because it's primarying. That's what is first. He's accusing Beto of being supported by outside influences. That Chuck Schumer comes in and rallies and raises money for him and stuff, and these aren't real Texans that are raising money for him. While at the same time, Ted Cruz is getting all this money from super PACs outside Texas, his national recognition from having tried to run for president, the RNC. They're all coming in to support him. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with that, but there's something wrong with the DNC supporting him, supporting his opponent. And the Democrat, Beto, has declined to accept any money or support from super PACs, while at the same time, Ted Cruz has like 4 super PACs that are working on his behalf. I mean,
It's
you can't
almost
collude
like
with them, but
Rubio saying like, I can't say I'm not going to take money from the NRA. Come on.
Exactly. And
It's
again,
money.
these are the same people who think that it's perfectly fine for the NRA to buy politicians and to lobby and support things, but think that there's something wrong with Democrats going in and counseling and supporting people that have been affected by gun violence to petition the government for redress of that. And
Right.
it's just the absolute blatant hypocrisy. I mean, both parties do it, but the GOP is far worse when it comes to that. I think it's ridiculous. So, I mean, that's really all I wanted to mention about
Ted
that.
Cruz doesn't have a neck.
And also, Ted Cruz does not have a neck, although I do not believe that he had anything to do with, nor did his family have anything to do with the death of John Kennedy. So, I think we should at least be saying that.
According to the Orange Man.
Not well, yeah. I mean,
And he's never lied before, so.
I don't think. No, I think that he's pretty much on par with George Washington.
Trustworthy guy.
Never, I cannot tell a lie.
Yeah.
Chopping
Wasn't that
down
Lincoln?
cherry trees. Was it Lincoln?
I think Lincoln was I cannot tell a lie. But
One of them.
that's neither here nor there.
Does Trump have
um,
wooden teeth?
Yes.
They're like ivory. I think his son killed an elephant in
Yes.
Africa, and they made his teeth out of the
Yes.
ivory
Yes.
because he kept having trouble slurring his words because his dentures were falling out. Apparently.
Okay. I think that's
what
it.
he
Is that all we got?
You said you wanted to say something about Black Panther.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
I mean, the guy's sitting here waiting this entire time
wait,
to hear his name.
yes, T'Challa.
T'Challa.
So I have So Black Panther is sort of taking over the world at the moment, and you sort of cannot not talk about Black Panther. Um, but I sort of just wanted to say why it's important, and a lot of people sort of don't understand. And this is more of a and we're going to discuss this on the reel, so I will be brief. Um, for I've seen a lot of movies ruin communities.
Mm-hmm.
Things like Scarface, which is one of my favorite movies, but there are a lot of people that wanted to be Scarface. And I've seen that firsthand in the 80s and 90s where people would try to emulate that. And I've seen a lot of movies that take place in Africa, and they either display African people as sort of less than. They display African people as savages sometimes, or they'll display Africa as though it's like a shithole, right? And it was nice to see on screen in Black culture sort of catered to and treated with such reverence,
Dignity, at least.
And you know, seeing and there's this whole thing sort of it displays the idea of an uncolonized Africa and what it could have been, and the whole political message there is about there are messages of nationalism and protecting the resources of your own country, and those issues get addressed. So if you're into politics, it's there. It speaks to the Black experience. It speaks to building bridges and not barriers. It speaks to nativists and nationalists and the idea of letting people in. There's a line in there where one of the characters says about Wakanda, should we let people come in because they're like a hermit kingdom? Should we let people come in? And one of the leads says, if you bring people in, you bring their problems. And this is a lot of what the movie deals with, and it does.
There were no white citizens of Wakanda?
No. And as soon as the two white people did come there, everybody started fighting. So there's that.
Weren't they both in Lord of the Rings?
Yes, they were the Tolkien white people.
They were the Tolkien white actors?
Tolkien.
That's funny. Tolkien.
Yes.
Is that how its name is pronounced?
Yes. But we'll get into it more. But it's an important movie, and it's taking the world by storm because I think it displays a culture that maybe the whole world should want to see.
Aren't they up to like $500 million?
Demonize it. It did that in 6 days.
Mm-hmm.
And just in the U.S., it outgrossed the Justice League in 4 days, and the Justice League was in theaters for 3 months. But whatever. Maybe we should display more of that. We spend a lot of time watching.
And
Lord
you know
of
what?
the
It's
Rings
weird that it takes it takes seeing how profitable it can be for movie studios to realize, okay, maybe we should talk about Africa and African Americans and the African American experience in a positive way, because it looks like it's making us some money.
Yes, and if you wonder why people are
works for the NRA.
Yeah. But if you wonder why people are so excited about it, let them have that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. We'll talk more on the reel. Why don't you tell them where
that was
they can
good for
find
the economy.
You, good sir.
You can find me in St. Louis rolling on dubs.
Or you can find him at Joseph S. Oswald at Twitter.
Where is it now? Is it above me?
It's below you.
It's below me?
Always below you.
It's always down here?
Always
fantastic. You can find me on the Twitters.
Joseph S.
You can
Oswald.
comment on the video feed, whether you're watching on Facebook or rewatching it on YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube page as well.
And soon on iTunes.
As soon as we get the economics of that rolled out. Website also soon to come. R Squared Network is a network with 3 shows on it now. Soon to be more than that, I'm sure, if you ever find 27 hours in a day. If you do, please let me know. I could use some of them. What about you, Steve? Where are they going to find you at?
You're going to find me later today on The Reel, where we're going to discuss all the news of the week, some of which includes Black Panther. But there'll be more. Also, you can find me on our third show, which is 36 Chambers of Fatherhood. If you're a dad and you want to just talk about dad experiences, you can call in, or you can listen to us talk about how our lives are being ruined. No. Um, but 36 Chambers of Fatherhood on the reel later today and next week. And those things are on iTunes and YouTube and all those things. And you can find me at Steve A.M. Johnson on your favorite social media network as long as it's not Snapchat.
So wait, on the real, have you ever thought about discussing like what I mean? Because we're talking about all these zombie revival shows of like Will and Grace and Roseanne and all this stuff. You ever talk about like what shows should be brought back? Are you thinking
We
about American
do.
Hero?
Also, one more thing for On the Reel, and we should really wrap this thing up,
Mm-hmm.
is we do a weekly review show for The Walking Dead, which comes back this Sunday. So
Oh, how
you
about
can
that?
catch us live right after the show. I like to think we're better than Talking Dead, but right after Walking Dead airs, we sort of go live and we talk about it. So
Good.
if you're into that show, come on, check it out.
All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining us on the second page where we were hoping to talk past the points. We certainly hope you'll join us next Saturday and every Saturday thereafter. Jay
For the
will,
rest of your life.
for the rest of your
always.
life, you are now addicted to it. We need a hypnotoad.
Yes.
I'm sure Jay will be back next time. Don't forget to pick up a copy of the Constitution. Read it, learn it, love it. Go out and vote. Primary season is here. You're very important. And the elections in November are going to be very important. We'll be talking about them. Go out and see Black Panther. It doesn't hurt to expand your horizons. And go and subscribe to our YouTube page and follow us, repost us, tweet us, do whatever you can. Tell your friends, your grandmother, all them other people. Just do it. Just do it.
And as usual, hugs not drugs. And now I'm adding something else, which is Wakanda forever.
Yeah.
We are
America.